It was a warm summer night in Los Angeles, June 12th, 1994. In the upscale neighborhood of Brentwood, all appeared calm. The streets were quiet, homes lit softly from within, the kind of night that lulled the city to sleep. But behind one elegant gate, horror waited. Nicole Brown Simpson lay at the foot of her front steps, her body twisted, brutalized, throat slashed so deep she was nearly decapitated. Just feet away, Ron Goldman, a friend, stabbed viciously over and over again, as if punished for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The blood trail was long, the crime scene was a symphony of rage, and the police, they followed the evidence to one man. Orenthal James Simpson, O.J. Simpson, a former NFL superstar, Hollywood actor, beloved by millions. What followed was no ordinary trial. It became a cultural earthquake, shattering trust, fueling debates, and dividing a nation already strained by race, power, and justice. This wasn't just about two murders. It was about who we believe and why. This is the story of a courtroom where facts were weaponized, a media circus where truth blurred into entertainment, and a jury that had the fate of a celebrity and a nation in their hands. This is not just the story of O.J. Simpson, it's the story of America at war with itself, filed now under the dark file. It was shortly after midnight, June 13th, 1994. The streets of Brentwood, a wealthy enclave of Los Angeles, were dark and still, but outside 875 South Bundy Drive, something was wrong.
A white Akita, Nicole Brown Simpson's dog, was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk. Its thick fur was stained with blood. It whined, barked, pulled at its leash, and for hours no one seemed to notice. No one listened to what the dog was desperately trying to say.
Just after 12:10 a.m., a neighbor, disturbed by the dog's cries, stepped outside and saw the Akita standing near a gate. Curious and concerned, he followed. What he found would change history.
Nicole Brown Simpson lay on the ground, just outside her front steps, her body soaked in blood, her head barely attached to her neck, her white dress stained crimson, her eyes still open.
And a few feet away, 25-year-old Ron Goldman, slumped, face down, with multiple deep stab wounds in his chest, neck, and arms. He had fought, his knuckles bruised, his hands sliced, but it hadn't been enough. Low, ominous. Blood coated the brick walkway. It was smeared across the walls, pooled beneath their bodies. It wasn't just a murder. It was an execution. One done in a fit of violent, personal rage. Near Nicole's body, officers discovered a single leather glove, soaked, crumpled, almost forgotten. At the rear of the house, bloody footprints led away. Size 12, deep imprints. Rushed, fleeing. In the early hours of that morning, the LAPD began piecing together what had happened, and quickly, a chilling possibility emerged. This wasn't random. This wasn't a robbery. There was no forced entry, no valuables stolen, nothing disturbed except 2 lives, now gone. It was personal, intimate, someone Nicole knew. Someone she feared. All signs pointed to one man, a man she had loved, a man she had feared, a man she had divorced just 2 years earlier. Orenthal James Simpson. June 17th, 1994. 5 days after the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the nation waited. O.J. Simpson, charged with 2 counts of murder, was supposed to surrender himself to LAPD detectives that morning at 11 a.m. He didn't show. Instead, he vanished, gone without a word, His lawyers were stunned. Police were baffled. His whereabouts? A mystery. And then the phone rang. It was O.J. Simpson, calling 911 from the back seat of a white Ford Bronco. The call went out to law enforcement. A manhunt was now underway. But what followed wasn't a chase. It was something stranger, slower, and far more surreal. On Interstate 405, a white Bronco appeared, moving at barely 40 miles per hour. Behind the wheel, Al Cowlings, O.J.'s longtime friend and former teammate. In the back seat, O.J., holding a gun to his head, threatening to take his own life if police tried to stop him. By now, nearly every police unit in Southern California was following them. Behind, beside, helicopters swirled overhead like vultures. And inside homes across America, the entire nation watched it unfold. Nearly 95 million people tuned in, live. News anchors scrambled to make sense of it. Sports channels interrupted NBA coverage. Bars and restaurants turned up the volume. For one brief hour, everyone stopped. It wasn't just a car chase. It was something symbolic. A man once hailed as a national hero, now at the center of a media circus. A fugitive. A ghost. As the Bronco rode through Los Angeles, people gathered on freeway overpasses. Some held signs, some waved fists, others clapped and shouted, "Run, O.J., run!" It wasn't just bizarre, it was haunting. The slow-motion pursuit lasted over 2 hours. When it finally ended at Simpson's Brentwood estate, police waited, negotiated, until O.J. finally surrendered, still clutching photos of his family, still holding the gun. The nation exhaled. But something had changed, something irreversible. This wasn't the justice system they knew. It was theater, a live performance, part tragedy, part spectacle, part death march. And for many, it felt less like a chase and more like a funeral procession. A funeral for America's faith in truth. The scene was horrific, but the evidence seemingly overwhelming. LAPD moved swiftly. Within hours, a mountain of damning clues began to pile up. First, Nicole Brown Simpson's blood, found smeared inside O.J.'s white Bronco, in the back seat, in the door panel. Drops, some fresh, some dried. Second, O.J.'s own blood, discovered at the crime scene on Bundy Drive, in the walkway, near the victims. Impossible to explain away. Third, a trail of bloody shoe prints, leading away from Nicole's body. The print matched a rare Italian designer shoe, Bruno Mali, size 12. Only 299 pairs existed in that exact model. O.J. wore a size 12. Photos would later emerge of him wearing the exact brand, despite his earlier denial. Fourth, the gloves. One left behind at Nicole's home. One right glove found at O.J.'s Rockingham estate behind his guest house. Both soaked in blood, both matching, both embedded with fibers from Nicole's dress, Ron Goldman's jeans, and O.J.'s own hair. Finally, the cuts. O.J. had fresh wounds on his left hand the night of the murders. He told police he cut himself on a glass, but the timing was too perfect, too convenient. To the prosecution, it was airtight, a slam dunk, a mountain of forensic connections wrapped in motive and opportunity. O.J. had no alibi. His relationship with Nicole had been volatile, filled with restraining orders, 911 calls, and past abuse. But in this case, Facts weren't everything. When Detective Mark Furman, one of the lead investigators, took the stand, everything changed. The defense, led by the savvy and aggressive Johnny Cochran, introduced tape recordings of Furman casually using racial slurs, dozens of times, with pride, with hate. Furman, when asked under oath if he had ever used the N-word in the past 10 years, invoked the Fifth Amendment in front of a jury that included African-American citizens. The question no longer was, did O.J. do it? The question became, can we trust the system accusing him? The defense didn't need to prove O.J.'s innocence. All they needed was reasonable doubt, and the LAPD had handed them exactly that. The trial was no longer about blood and gloves and shoes. It was about race, about power, about corruption in American law enforcement. And with every piece of evidence, the defense turned the spotlight away from the murder and onto the institution trying to solve it. As the media storm raged and the public picked sides, O.J. Simpson assembled an army, not of soldiers, but of strategists, the kind of minds who could turn reasonable doubt into a weapon of mass persuasion. They called themselves the Dream Team, but they weren't just lawyers, they were courtroom architects, each with a specific role in constructing O.J.'s defense narrative. Their battleground, not just the courtroom, but America's living rooms. Leading the charge was Johnny Cochran, the charismatic civil rights titan. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a preacher in a courtroom robe. With thunder in his voice and fire in his rhetoric, Cochran reframed the case. This wasn't about murder, it was about race, police misconduct, and a history of injustice. By his side was Robert Shapiro, the original architect of the legal team. Slick, media-savvy, and connected, Shapiro knew how to control a headline as much as he controlled a jury. Then there was F. Lee Bailey, a legal bulldog with a reputation for dismantling witnesses piece by piece. His aggressive cross-examinations were legendary. He didn't just poke holes in testimonies, he shredded them. And behind the scenes, Robert Kardashian, a quiet but loyal friend to O.J. His courtroom presence gave the trial a new layer of emotional complexity. The now iconic moment of him reading O.J.'s supposed suicide note live on television would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Dream Team wasn't just fighting evidence. They were dismantling the LAPD's reputation brick by brick. They pointed to errors, contamination, missing logs, but most of all, they targeted Detective Mark Furman. When recordings surfaced of Furman using racial slurs and boasting about police brutality, it gave the defense the perfect villain. If Furman was capable of racism, what else could he be capable of? Cochran leaned into this. In his hands, the courtroom became a pulpit. Every glove, every photograph, every speck of blood became a symbol, not just of a crime, but of systemic corruption. The jury wasn't just being asked if O.J. did it. They were being asked, can we trust the system that's trying to convict him? And in that doubt, the Dream Team saw their path to victory. It was supposed to be just another piece of evidence, a formality, a glove found at the crime scene, and its match behind O.J.'s guest house. The prosecution believed they had him cornered. But then came the moment that turned the entire trial upside down. O.J. Simpson was asked to try on the gloves. In front of the jury, the media, and millions watching at home, he slid latex gloves onto his hands first, for sanitary reasons, the court said. Then, the blood-stained leather gloves. O.J. winced. He twisted his fingers. He tugged. The gloves looked tight, too tight. They didn't seem to fit. Johnny Cochran seized the moment like a seasoned showman. His voice rang out like a verdict before the jury had even deliberated. "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." And that was it. In that moment, reasonable doubt wasn't just introduced, it exploded into the courtroom like a bomb. Everything the prosecution had built, the DNA, the blood, the timeline, the gloves, it all began to unravel. The defense knew this wasn't just about facts. This was about feeling, about perception, about theater, and they had just delivered the scene of the century. O.J. Simpson, NFL legend, Hollywood icon, had just raised his hands, fingers splayed, gloves stretched across them, and made the world wonder, what if he really didn't do it? But for the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, it was a devastating twist. What they saw as proof of guilt, the world saw as a performance. This wasn't just a murder trial. It was a national spectacle, broadcast into millions of living rooms, turning court proceedings into prime-time entertainment. From the moment the cameras were allowed inside the courtroom, the O.J. Simpson trial transformed into something far bigger than justice. It became a cultural obsession. Day after day, Americans sat glued to their TVs. Housewives, truckers, college students, people rearranged their schedules just to catch the latest testimony. Coffee breaks were no longer about weather or sports, they were about O.J. Networks scrambled for ratings. CNN aired the trial live, while talk shows dissected each twist. Late-night comedians turned it into punchlines. The line between reality and performance began to blur. But it wasn't just about murder anymore. It became about identity, about history, about America's unhealed wounds. For many Black Americans, O.J. became a symbol, a high-profile Black man being crushed under a corrupt, racially biased justice system. They remembered Rodney King. They remembered Watts. The LAPD had blood on its hands long before Nicole Brown's. For many white Americans, the evidence was overwhelming. Blood trails, gloves, DNA. To them, this was about guilt and getting away with it. They saw a double standard, reversed and televised in real time. The country split in two. Courtroom sketches were replaced by full-color drama. The legal system became a battleground of perception, and America was on trial just as much as O.J. Simpson. Justice became entertainment. October 3rd, 1995. 9 months of testimony, 133 days in court, over 50 witnesses, thousands of exhibits. The trial of the century was nearing its final breath. And then, after just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The world stopped. Offices turned on televisions, schools wheeled in carts with tube screens, people crowded around store windows. It was a moment unlike any other. The courtroom was silent. Cameras rolled, millions watched as the clerk stood and read the verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant not guilty of the crime of murder. A wave of emotion swept across the country like a shock wave. Some gasped, others wept. In many Black neighborhoods, the streets erupted in celebration. Cheers, car horns, tears of relief. In predominantly white areas, silence, confusion, outrage. How could the evidence, the DNA, the timeline, the blood, have led to this? The reactions were as divided as the country itself. For many African Americans, this was justice, not just for O.J., but for decades of injustice, abuse, and brutality at the hands of law enforcement. It was a system that had failed them again and again, and now, for once, had failed in their favor. For others, it felt like the system had failed again. But this time, it was the victims who had been betrayed. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were dead, and no one would pay. Families were torn apart by arguments, friendships strained under the weight of opinions. The verdict didn't close the wound, it tore it wider open.
And through it all, one question echoed louder than any cheer or protest. Had justice truly been served? And through it all, one question echoed louder than any cheer or protest. Had justice truly been served?
2 years after the criminal trial ended in chaos and controversy, another courtroom prepared for a second showdown. This time there would be no live television, no crowds outside chanting, no celebrity fanfare. In 1997, the family of Ron Goldman, devastated by the not guilty verdict, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against O.J. Simpson in civil court. Nicole Brown's estate joined the suit. The stakes were still high, but the rules were different. In a civil case, the burden of proof isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just preponderance of the evidence. O.J. took the stand, something he never did in the criminal trial. He was grilled about inconsistencies, his timeline, and his past abuse of Nicole. This time, there was no Johnny Cochran to spin a narrative. No jury dazzled by flashy theatrics, just facts. On February 4th, 1997, the jury delivered its verdict. They found O.J. Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages, money the Goldman family has spent decades trying to collect. O.J. never paid it in full. He called the civil ruling unfair, but to the families it was a sliver of justice they had been denied. Still, despite being found responsible for 2 brutal murders, O.J. Simpson never spent a single day in prison for them. After the criminal and civil trials, O.J. Simpson faded from the courtroom, but not from controversy. His name remained a flashpoint. For some, he was a man acquitted by the justice system. For others, a killer who got away. In 2006, more than a decade after the murders, Simpson ignited a new firestorm. He announced he had written a book titled, "If I Did It." It was marketed as a hypothetical account of how he would have committed the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, if he had been the killer. The public response was swift and furious. Families, advocacy groups, even former fans were disgusted. Many saw it as a confession wrapped in fiction. Television interviews were canceled. Protests erupted. The publisher pulled the book before it hit shelves. But that wasn't the end of it. In a twist almost as surreal as the trial, a court awarded the rights to the book to Ron Goldman's family, part of their unpaid civil judgment. They re-released the book, but this time the cover design made one chilling change. The word "if" was barely visible, leaving the title to read simply, "I Did It." Then came Las Vegas. In 2007, Simpson and a group of men stormed a hotel room at the Palace Station Hotel and Casino. He was allegedly trying to reclaim sports memorabilia he claimed had been stolen. But this wasn't a heated conversation. This was armed robbery. He brought guns. He threatened people. He took property by force. This time, there were no cameras in the courtroom, no charismatic dream team, no cheering crowds. O.J. was tried in Nevada, and the jury saw a very different man. On October 3, 2008, exactly 13 years to the day after his murder acquittal, O.J. Simpson was found guilty of armed robbery and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison. Some called it karma. Others said it was long-delayed justice. He served 9 years before being granted parole in 2017. But the shadow of 1994 still followed him. He may have been a free man again, but he was never truly free from the past. On October 3, 2008, exactly 13 years to the day after his murder acquittal, O.J. Simpson was found guilty of armed robbery and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison. Some called it karma. Others said it was long-delayed justice. He served 9 years before being granted parole in 2017. But the shadow of 1994 still followed him. He may have been a free man again, but he was never truly free from the past. The trial of O.J. Simpson wasn't just a courtroom drama. It became a cultural earthquake, a televised epic that laid bare America's deepest divisions. It revealed the cracks in the justice system, the way wealth could buy expertise, the way celebrity could shape a narrative, and the way a courtroom could become a battlefield for history, race, and media spectacle. Slight pause. Then, more deliberate tone. For many black Americans, it was vindication, a moment when the system, which had so often failed them, finally tilted their way. For many white Americans, it was injustice in plain sight, a killer walking free because of fame and legal gamesmanship. Even decades later, the question still lingers in the air like smoke after a fire. Did he do it? And the more unsettling question, the one we try not to say out loud is, even if he did, could anything have stopped him? Pause, then quieter, intimate delivery. The O.J. Simpson trial taught us that justice is never black and white. It's drenched in shades of fear, anger, prejudice, and perception. Final line, slow, echoing emphasis. And in the case of O.J. Simpson, the truth may never come out of hiding. It may forever remain locked away inside the dark file.